So we've agus fáilte hig seminar tróna iniu. Good evening and you're very welcome. My name is Alexander O'Hara. I'm the National Director for Catechetics, and on behalf of the Council for Catechetics of the Irish Episcopal Conference and Veritas, you're all most welcome to the 6th webinar in this series, Together Along the Way, Conversations on Catholic Faith Formation in Contemporary Ireland. This webinar series, organised on behalf of the Council for Catechetics and Veritas, aims to bring together leading theologians, religious educators and catechists to explore new avenues for Catholic faith formation in contemporary Ireland, inspired by the new Directory for Catechesis published by the Pontifical Council for Promoting New Evangelization in 2020. In the large, diverse and complex religious education landscape, directories for catechesis function as atlases that guide educators and faith communities. However, we need leaders and visionaries who help us to interpret those atlases and read the maps they contain. In the run-up to the National Synod in Ireland, we hope that this webinar series will animate and inspire religious educators, teachers, pastoral leaders, evangelizers, and anyone else interested in sharing the best of the Catholic tradition with creativity and conviction. And just to note that this is a public forum and we will be recording this webinar. So I'm honored to welcome our 6th speaker in the series, Gerard Hanley. Gerard grew up in Galway with the ambition of being a professional soccer player. He did end up playing underage soccer for the Republic of Ireland and played 7 years in the League of Ireland. His faith came alive as a teenager thanks to the influence of an RE teacher who brought his classes on a number of retreats. He left football in 2016 and has been working full-time in youth ministry since then. His last role was with the Dublin in youth before taking on the position of Director of Alpha Youth this summer. Alpha Youth provides young people in schools, parishes, and other Christian communities to explore the Christian faith in a safe and welcoming environment. And Gerard will speak to us this evening on the need for systematic and intentional formation of young Catholics in Ireland who profess faith in Jesus Christ, and insight from Holy Family Mission. And we might just begin with a brief prayer, the Synod prayer. So we stand before you, Holy Spirit, as we gather together in your name, with you alone to guide us. Make yourself at home in our hearts. Teach us the way we must go and how we are to pursue it. We are weak and sinful. Do not let us promote disorder. Do not let ignorance lead us down the wrong path, nor partiality influence our actions. Let us find in you our unity, so that we may journey together to eternal life and not stray from the way of truth and what is right. All this we ask of you, who are at work in every place and time, in the communion of the Father and the Son, forever and ever. Amen. Gerard, you're very welcome, and thanks for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Alex. Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here, and I feel a little bit humbled that someone would want me to share my bachelor's degree thesis with the likes of you guys. So I'm really happy to do that. Sorry if you can hear that my son is crying outside the door. I don't know if any of you heard that, but I did. But before I kind of get into the presentation, I'd just like to share a bit more about my own story, because it very much informs my motivation for doing the type of research that I did. So as Alex mentioned, I experienced a conversion through retreats, really, that our RE teacher brought us on in secondary school. I had encounters with Jesus through confession and before Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament in Knock. And then I had another encounter with the Lord on another retreat in Clonfert a year later. And what I experienced after that was essentially very little support in my own faith as a teenager. I didn't have a clue where to go, who to turn to. I was enthusiastic about Jesus and wanted to learn about him and follow him, but I was totally lost and needed a lot of support that I wasn't getting at home, in school, or in the parish, which are the 3 primary places where our literature on these things suggests that we should get formation. So obviously what I experienced was that there was something wrong here, because I wasn't being formed at home, in school, or in the parish, but that's what I did want to be formed. And really where I began to experience formation was through movements in the church. The first place was on Tubernua in Galway, where it's an ecumenical ministry, Protestants and Catholics working together And one staff member in particular, but the whole community, I suppose, were helpful in terms of helping me to grow in my relationship with the Lord, to develop a prayer life, etc. And then from there, initiating me into the missionary life of the church. So when I then began to study theology through Maryvale Institute, part-time, long distance, I decided to do it like that because I was playing professional football at the time, and I did have the time to study part-time. So this seemed perfect. And so I was studying theology part-time. And as I read what the church offers us in terms of what the church desires for young people and the formation that the church wants us to have, that plus my experience, in other words, what we have written down plus my experience, is like, wow, like there's just such a huge gap. And that really motivated me to want to look at this real need for, as the title says, systematic and intentional formation of young Irish Catholics. Now, I said who profess faith in Jesus Christ very intentionally, because on the one hand, I think it's glaringly obvious that there's a huge need for evangelization in Ireland. Like we need to, like I needed to be evangelized before I needed to be catechized. And I was evangelized through these retreat teams and the RE teacher in the school. I was evangelized. I had an encounter with Jesus. I began to profess faith in him, but now I needed formation, which I didn't get apart from kind of ad hoc, as I would say, through different movements in the church, like on Tubernua, and then other individuals, prayer meetings, even YouTube. Like I learned an awful lot from YouTube, but I shouldn't have had to go there. So the title of the study was The Need for Systematic and Intentional Formation of Young Catholics in Ireland to Profess Faith in Jesus Christ. And it's an insight through Holy Family Mission. I'll explain more about Holy Family Mission soon. So just to assess the situation in Ireland, there are three main studies that I relied on, I guess, to just show or highlight what the situation is in Ireland regarding faith formation, or the state of the faith, if you like, of young people in Ireland. The Barna Group produced this report in 2017, Finding Faith in Ireland. Some great statistics and information there. Stephen Bullivant there over in Twickenham, he has this report. It's more European, but there's some information there on Ireland and in there as well, produced in 2018. And then we have Dr. Gareth Byrne and Dr. Francis there they're from DCU. There was research done there. Many of you might be aware of that book. It's Religion and Education, The Voices of Young People in Ireland. And I found that very helpful as well for just gaining statistics. And I'll just go through a few statistics that I think highlight the situation on the ground in Ireland. So from the Barna report, they describe just 31% of teens, that's 14 to 18-year-olds, and 20% of young adults, 19 to 25-year-olds, in the Republic of Ireland as practicing Christians. Now, their definition of practicing Christian might not fully satisfy the definition of a practicing Catholic, because they said, you know, that I self-identify as Christian and have attended a religious service within the last month. But at the same time, it's still quite a low number. I was actually surprised. I would have thought the number was lower myself, to be honest. The report also found that among practicing Christians, now this is among those 20% and among those 31% that we're talking about here, only 50% of that believe that Jesus is equal to God the Father. Only 29% say that they do not know 29% say they do not know if hell is a real place. 26% do not know whether Jesus was physically raised from the dead, and 24% do not know whether God is the Trinity. So I suppose out of those who consider themselves practicing Christians, their level of fairly basic Christian knowledge, let's say, is quite low. And then the research also showed that Catholic youth, in particular, to be less convinced of certain Christian teachings compared with their non-Catholic counterparts. For example, while 60% of non-Catholic Christians believe in the resurrection, only 44% of Catholics believe in the resurrection, which is quite amazing, really. So again, this is just the situation on the ground. I mean, in one way, we don't need these studies to tell us that there's a crisis of faith in Ireland among young people, but it is helpful to look at the statistics and to identify it. So the study, Religion and Education, The Voices of Young People in Ireland, reports that only 24% of females and 25% of males who self-identify as Catholic are faithful in attending weekly Mass. Okay, so those who say, yes, I am Catholic, only about a quarter of them actually attend weekly Mass. From a moral perspective, only 4% of female and 3% of male Catholic students agreed with the statement that sexual intercourse before marriage is always wrong. And only 7% of female and 7% of male Catholic students agreed with the statement that drunkenness is always wrong. Now, I had a little bit of reservation about the phrasing of those questions. I think the phrase always wrong can almost move one to kind of say, well, it can't be always wrong, and that kind of doubt in the mind or whatever. But still, I suppose Catholic, moral teaching does teach that sexual intercourse outside of marriage is wrong, and likewise with getting drunk. So, but either way, it's very low percentages there on those two from that study. So that just kind of, I presented more statistics than that at the beginning of the research project, the thesis. But then what I did was I looked at the area of catechesis itself, looking at church documents and what our church says catechesis is and what its goal is and what it should look like and what it should lead to among young people. And now, just to say that I wrote this in 2020, and so obviously I was doing the research 2018 up to 2020. So the directory for catechesis, the new one was not out, but I'll comment on that after this. So this is really a very key statement for me. It's from Catechesi Tradendae, John Paul II, but it's used in the General Directory for Catechesis 1998 and the new Directory for Catechesis. It uses this phrase as the definitive aim of catechesis is to put people not only in touch, but in communion, in intimacy with Jesus Christ. So it's such a key idea or concept that this is the goal. We have to have this as the goal in catechesis. Our goal is not just information or knowledge or even kind of to develop some sort of practice. It's really centered on relationship, it's communion, it's intimacy with Jesus, the living God, the one who is alive and we can interact with and communicate with and be in true communion with today. Catechetical instruction must be systematic and programmed to reach a precise goal. It must be sufficiently complete, not stopping short at the initial proclamation of the Christian mystery. And it must be an integral Christian initiation open to all the other factors of Christian life. So again, it's quite broad, but it's supposed to be systematic instruction. And another phrase, I don't think I have it on these slides, but that catechesis, I think this is from, I can't remember which document it's from, but it's that it's an apprenticeship in the entire Christian life, which I love that phrase as well. And this phrase, this little quote here from the General Directory for Catechesis was very important to me in the research as well. It's that it's integral Christian formation, in other words, holistic, and it covers all these areas, and from morality through to their participation in prayer and liturgy. And those of you who are familiar with the General Directory for Catechesis, it lists out the different areas that we need to work on and help people grow in the Christian life as we initiate them fully into the life and mission of the church. I hope I'm going at a pace that's appropriate. So the Directory for Catechesis in 2020, just a note on this, I didn't include this in the research because it hadn't been released at the time. But on chapter 3, when it speaks about the identity of catechesis, I think this is very important for Ireland. Catechesis is a privileged stage in the process of evangelization. So in the General Directory for Catechesis, it emphasizes this a little bit more, that that catechesis is at one stage in the process of evangelization. But it says in the new Directory for Catechesis, if it is still useful to make conceptual distinctions between pre-evangelization, first proclamation, which I use the word evangelization there, but pre-evangelization, first proclamation, catechesis, and then ongoing formation, in the present context, it is no longer possible to stress such differences. And the reason for that is that those today who ask for or have already received the grace of the sacraments often do not have the explicit experience of faith or do not intimately know its power and warmth. And I know this very, how would I say, well. I've done many school retreats over the years, and I've done school retreats with everyone from confirmation students over up to leaving certs and others as well. And I've gotten to know young people in Ireland, and I can tell you now that those who have received all of the sacraments or are preparing for sacraments, I would say in Ireland, huge percentage would fit in this category, that those who present themselves for the sacraments often do not have the explicit experience of faith or do not intimately know its power and warmth. In other words, those who are going through catechesis essentially need to be evangelized in that process, because sometimes we can, change the entire system, but I think also we can learn to evangelize while we catechize. And I think they used the phrase, I don't know if I have it here. Yeah, I do. This reality brings into focus the need for a catechesis that is consistent, in a consistent way, can be called kerygmatic, meaning a catechesis that is entering more deeply into the kerygma. So in other words, that kerygma, that basic core gospel message, which is God loves you. Yes, there's this problem with sin in the world, but God has sent a solution, which is that he sent his only son, Jesus, to save us, that he sent him in love, and that we can respond to this gift of salvation through faith, and we can receive the Holy Spirit to live the Christian life. I mean, that's one way of summarizing in a few sentences the kerygma, that core gospel message of the person of Jesus himself. And really that this is calling us to continually root catechesis in this basic core gospel message. Why? Because many Christians today, even if they're presenting themselves for sacraments, have not fully committed to this core gospel Christian message, which is based on committing ourselves to Jesus himself and receiving this gift of salvation in him. So the reason why I chose to do the case study with Holy Family Mission, for those of you who don't know who Holy Family Mission are, they are a group of people who I would say are responding to the need. So the crisis is obvious, and they would have identified this because the people who were involved in setting up Holy Family Mission identified a real need for formation for young people. They met many young people who had a great experience or were evangelized through maybe retreat ministry or things like that in Ireland, these once-off events or situations that might have been on a pilgrimage, but then they were just left with very little support. So they recognized the need and they responded. Holy Family Mission was established in 2016 by 2 lay people and a priest under the auspices of Bishop Alphonsus Cullinan in the Waterford and Lismore Diocese. And in the words of one core team member, the goal of Holy Family Mission is to intentionally form young people into disciples. They do this by providing 1 or 2 years of a wholesome formation based on 5 foundational pillars: academic formation, spiritual formation, personal formation, formation in community life, and missionary activity. So that's who Holy Family Mission are. At the moment, they have approximately 14 to 20, I think, is the average number of young adults. So anyone, I mean, I guess the average age would be anything from 18 to 30, that kind of age of young adults who give their life for this 1 or 2 years of wholesome Christian formation. And the reason, sorry, just to say before I go on, the reason why I chose to interview these people is because, again, as the study suggests, what I was most interested in is those young people who do profess faith in Jesus Christ. So what are we doing for the few, let's say, who are committed Christians? How are we forming them? And what do they need? What do they want? And also, like, why would they need to go to this place called Holy Family Mission for like 2 years of Catholic formation when they've been in Catholic education and ideally, like I said, the literature says that they should be formed in the parish, in the home, and in the school. And, our structures are there per se that should happen. But the reality is that these young people have said, well, actually, I didn't get it, so I need it. So I need to commit a whole 1 or 2 years of my life for Catholic formation. So I'll focus the rest of this presentation on what young people themselves are saying. I interviewed 6 young people in this community and the 3 core team members, and I got a balance between male and female, geographical spread. and first and second year. So it was a sample. This is very much a sample, but it was interestingly the consistency, I suppose, in the responses was interesting. So the strongest theme which emerged from the interviews was the significant need for the faith formation of young Catholics in Ireland. This need was unanimously expressed by the interviewees. Having been through 13 years of Catholic schooling, one young person who actually went on to be trained as a teacher said, "How am I supposed to teach children if I do not know the basics myself? Something I wasn't really taught growing up. I didn't know where I would get it, but I really felt I needed formation. I really strongly needed it." With regards to faith formation in Irish parishes, all the interviewees described a significant lack of faith formation for young people in Irish parishes. One young person described the returning to her parish from a pilgrimage as a culture shock. You are going from seeing people really involved in the Mass with an amazing amount of reverence, and then you are coming home to a parish that seems lifeless. Another had a similar experience after being fed on a pilgrimage. She said, "I would come home and still be looking for Jesus, but I just wasn't able to find him in my parish." So a little bit sad, maybe, that that's the case. But again, this is just the reality of what young people are saying. So the lack of faith formation in Irish schools also came across strongly. One young man summed up his experience by saying that secondary school is not at all an environment. Now, he was in a Catholic secondary school, not at all an environment where your faith flourishes. So you have to look outside of your school to find anything meaningful. By the way, I hope no one gets too discouraged. Sometimes it's just helpful to see the picture as it really is, and that's what part of this is, you know. So faith formation in Irish families. Families have played a significant role in the formation of young Irish Catholics whom I interviewed, the formation of the young Irish Catholics whom I interviewed. So families have played a significant role. One young man acknowledged that the contribution of his dad in particular, saying, "I wouldn't have realized it, but all my catechesis would have come through him." Okay, so what I did notice was that there was, I don't think I have a slide on this next point, do I wonder? Well, I'll just say this first. A young woman said, "We are a family of faith and they make the faith look attractive to me." Now, what I would just say as a note of caution, I said this in the thesis, that while families played a significant role in the faith formation of the young Catholics whom I interviewed, that wasn't the case with all of them. And so it was a little bit hit or miss. So for some of them, they played a significant role, and for others, they didn't get a lot at home. So just a note on that. Now, this came up. I didn't go looking for this. I didn't ask questions specifically, by the way. The way that I phrased the questions and everything was just kind of left things fairly open for them. But faith formation in movements, pilgrimages, and religious congregations, this is where they seem to be being fed, in these three areas. So the interviewees almost unanimously, I would actually say unanimously, acknowledged the role, I don't know why I said almost, acknowledged the role of various lay movements, pilgrimages, and or religious congregations in the faith development of young Irish Catholics. Okay, so that's just a note. And that's also what I experienced myself in Ireland. I was looking to movements such as Youth 2000, pilgrimages, like I went, for one stage I went to Medjugorje, but that was when I was a bit older. And then religious congregations like the Franciscan Friars of Renewal have been quite helpful for me at different times, and the Dominicans also. So what young people want. The young Catholics whom I interviewed primarily expressed a desire and a need for four things. They expressed a desire and a need for community and support, spiritual formation, personal growth, and knowledge of the faith. Now, I didn't give them any of this stuff. This is what they said, just to be very clear. I didn't lead them or anything like that. When I said, "What do you want in regards to faith formation?" And this is what they said. They are in support of your faith, I think. And this is what they came back with. And some of them also expressed the desire to be formed as missionaries and for support in discerning their vocation. But the four primary ones were community and support, spiritual formation, personal growth, and knowledge of the faith. So regarding community and support, one young person, for example, said, we need to have solid friends around us who can help us on this journey with God. Because today in Ireland, it's completely secular and it's so easy to fall away from God. Regarding spiritual formation, so one young person who saw members of or community members from Holy Family Mission, I think at a retreat or something, she said, I could see it in them how much they loved him, Jesus. That really attracted me to just grow in love with Jesus in the Eucharist. So they often express this sort of desire for prayer and for growing in intimacy with the Lord. And this sort of, I suppose, not to underestimate that young people do desire spiritual formation, like authentic spiritual formation. And personal formation, this was quite a big topic as well. So when I came home during the summer, I was more confident. I grew confident around other people. I have gotten to know myself personally in a better light. Okay, so the whole idea of confidence and that kind of came up quite a lot. Regarding knowledge of the faith, we are craving the truth. I wanted to read about it. I wanted to seek it out. I wanted the catechism without realizing it. So interesting to hear a young person just saying that, like, I wanted the truth. I was craving the truth. It was very common for the young people. For, I think, I don't think I have the quotes there, but one of them spoke about how they were not impressed with a sort of a very pluralistic kind of approach to religious education. They were kind of like, we got everything except Catholicism, we got everything except Christianity. And it's kind of, one young person in particular described as everything was kind of laid out and you kind of choose whatever you want, sort of. And just there was a sort of sense of dissatisfaction with that. Now, again, we are talking about young people who do profess faith in Jesus, just to remember that. But again, if our Catholic schools and systems can't cater for them in their faith formation, then that's a serious problem. Just, I did put in some recommendations and other comments and stuff like that in the thesis, but just a few kind of concluding remarks here today. One of the core team members of Holy Family Mission noted that the Irish faith formation scene has changed radically since the Second Vatican Council, but our structures are exactly the same, and that's a problem. So in other words, a dependency on schools and that kind of system, it is because the reality of our culture has changed so much. Can we depend on the same structures? This particular person said that that's a problem. The previously dependent upon structures of family, school, and parish are no longer consistently reliable for integral Christian formation. And I guess that's just evidenced by the state of the church in Ireland and the state of faith in young people and what these young people whom I interviewed have said. So either there needs to be serious renewal in our schools, in our parishes, in our families, etc., or we need to look at just totally other structures really for doing this. As one of the young people themselves emphasized, being a young person today in Ireland, we really, really need formation. And that was really the title of the topic was, or the thesis was, the need for systematic and integral formation of young Irish Catholics in Ireland. And there's a young person just agreeing with that, like, we want formation, we need it. And it's good to hear the young people saying that. We have in our possession clear goals and guidelines for authentic Catholic catechesis. We lack a clear implementation process. I absolutely love things like the Directory for Catechesis. I know the General Directory from 1998 much better than the new one, but I love these documents that we have, and even the Catechism, all this stuff. It's the implementation of it really is where we're lacking. So this research has given a voice to young people who are hungry for formation. They have clearly expressed a hunger for catechesis and for support in their journey of faith. We have the example of Holy Family Mission, who are responding to this need and ploughing the ground ahead so that others may follow suit. The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. And I guess I did put in other recommendations and stuff. I don't feel like I was qualified, let's say, to answer all the problems for the Irish Church in relation to Irish faith formation. There's a need for maybe someone to take up the mantle and say, well, what are we actually going to do about this? I really wanted to highlight with real research through the statistics that I gathered from research that has been done and from interviewing young people. Come on, guys, like, there is a need for this and we really need to do something about it. So that's really that's really my research project, and I hope it was presented in a way that you could understand.
Thank you very much, Gerard. I just came back from Krakow in Poland, where there was a symposium on Christus Vivius in Europe, and there was about 160 attendees from, I think, 45 different countries. But exactly those issues that you addressed in your presentation came up very strongly in the feedback from young people as well. So that's again confirming, I suppose, what young people are looking for from the church at the moment. So thank you very much. We might just open it now to discussion. If you'd like to unmute yourselves, if there's any things that you'd like to further discuss, I'd be happy to do that now. So I suppose, how is your current role, Gerard? How does that feed into this, and in terms of your current apostolate?
Yeah. Well, so the apostolate that I'm with at the moment, even though we wouldn't use the word apostolate, mostly because it's an ecumenical movement, it's called Alpha. So Alpha is basically a course or a program that gives people an opportunity to explore Christianity. It's a tool for evangelization. Alpha exists to equip and serve the church in its mission and in leading people into a relationship with Jesus. And it began in 1990, or sorry, it began, I'll give you the date, but it began through the Church of England in England. And there's a guy called Nicky Gumbel who really kind of pioneered it a lot. And in Ireland now, I'm the director for Alpha Youth. So there's the Alpha film series for adults. The Alpha Youth series is basically creates a space for young people to explore the basics of the Christian faith and to respond in faith. And really where I'm working in the moment is in the area of evangelization, and I would say also pre-evangelization. So part of what I do is I want to give young people a good opportunity to explore the basics of the Christian faith, to have a good opportunity to hear the central gospel message. So really focusing in on that kerygma. At the moment, I'm actually not working primarily in catechesis or ongoing faith formation. But what I would say is one of the things that I am doing in my role with Alpha is I have got concrete opportunities now to do this, but I'm looking for more opportunities to actually train and form young people to lead Alpha themselves. So in other words, peer-led Alpha. So for example, in one school that I'm in at the moment, we took 50 young people. Well, we advertised Alpha. We said there was space for 40, and 50 signed up, which is great. And out of those 50, the teachers selected 10 who we would train as leaders. We trained those 10 to lead Alpha then for their peers. So in other words, those 10 young people are facilitating this conversation, this discussion about the basic core gospel message with their peers. And this is essentially piloting this, but I'm actually very interested to see how that challenges and helps to actually evangelize young people, where we actually give them responsibility. So, yeah.
That was another theme that came across in the symposium, co-responsibility. And yeah, so that's excellent. Yeah. Any other questions?
Does it, in the end of the day, a lot of it come down to family background and faith? Obviously, where there's a home where there's a love of faith and church and respect for people, that's a great start in any faith journey. And so many people simply don't get that today.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. That's absolutely true. And without a shadow of doubt, I think based on God's order, in other words, the way God has created us, humanity, the natural order is for us to grow and develop in secure, faith-filled families. That's his desire for us, that our faith flourishes in family. I guess the reality of the situation is that, as one person I heard said recently, society is fragmenting, and more families are not those secure, safe places where young people can grow and develop in faith. I mean, my own family, while I developed in somewhat in faith there, I certainly would not put my own faith down to my family background. That's my own personal experience. And I know many other Catholics today who also did not get, because most young people today growing up in Ireland, I mean the majority, are just not getting it in their families. Therefore, but we can absolutely, we need to be ministering to families. Absolutely, we do. But the reality is that there are a lot of young people out there who won't get it in their families, and the church has to respond to their needs and their desires and their so 100%. It's the natural order, but it is. But there's a need for formation for those who aren't getting it in their families as well. So we can't depend on the family, unfortunately, in Ireland right now.
Thank you, Bishop Larry. Any other
one
discussion?
of the things is, yes. I'm coming from a situation where I'm chaplain in a boys' secondary school. And I think part of I think, Gerard, you've touched on, is that significance of somebody or somebodies who, I suppose, you recognise as living a faith as opposed to just talking about it. And one of the things I have discovered, like last year, I had decided, like I knew that none of the guys were going to be taking part in the synodal process. So I decided to run the synod in the school. I went into every individual class. There's 4 classes in each year group. And I did the synod over 2 periods of RE with every class. They were delighted. And in fact, they want more synods. They want a synod every year, some of them. You know, so they were being heard, they were being listened to. And what they didn't realize at that time was that what they were saying, even though I used different questions, I used questions that I got through the Diocese of Limerick and through CYMI. And the first of those, I was blown away, the very first group I had, because my first question was, if there was no faith at all in the world, what difference would it make? And they actually came up with it. Faith was important, basically was what they were saying, because you couldn't trust anybody, there'd be no trust, there'd be no hope. You couldn't even have a football team, like lads of 14 or 15, and that would be with our interest. Society would ultimately break down. There'd be anarchy. There'd be fewer wars, but more fighting. It was amazing, the sort of stuff that I got back. But that got them thinking. And when it came to the point of asking, what would make it attractive then to be part of a church, of a faith community? And how can the church listen better? Their responses actually have mirrored the responses across the whole 26 dioceses. And that's what we're working on at the moment with them, of how that they're not out of tune. They're actually saying the same as everybody else. So it's not just young people. It's the whole church in Ireland is in the same boat with regards to that. And I also have the Ember team, which is an initiative from the Dublin Archdiocese. And when I was recruiting the transition years for that last year as 5th years to be faith leaders in the community, one lad whom I happen to know was gay, he wanted to know, did you have to be religious to be part of it? And I said, no, but you need to be open. He, at the moment, is looking to be part of the group going to World Youth Day. So there's all sorts of, and I have a gang of TYs who want to do nothing but stay in the oratory. So there's things happening, and it's about being there and being present with them. And taking them then step by step.
Oh, thank you, Evelyn. That actually, again, what you said corresponded to some of the points that were raised in Krakow. So many express the common desires of young people to be noticed and acknowledged, to be accepted in a non-judgmental way, to be accompanied and inspired by authentic Christian witnesses, to be given responsibility and to be taken seriously. And some were led to Christ by fellow students and friends who took the time to listen to them, accompany them, and answer their questions about faith. And it was through this authentic witness, what you mentioned as well, Gerard, that led them to the church. The personal experience and encounter with the risen Jesus as a real and living person was fundamental and is the basis for all catechetical programs. So that's
Absolutely.
It seems we know in says what they're looking for. Thank you for sharing that.
Sorry, direct a question to Gerard, and thank you for the input. I found that really it was shocking. It's very, very sad, but it's the reality. But Gerard, my question is where do we go from here? I can appreciate what you're saying about the Holy Family mission, but it's not realistic for every young person who wants the faith formation. It's not realistic for every one of them to go on the Holy Family mission for 2 years. But where do you see us feeding the need of those young people?
Look, I'll be honest. When it came to and even my thesis supervisor, when it came to writing that section on recommendations going forward, like I did write a section on it, and I can briefly kind of just share what I said in terms of recommendations. And one of the things that I said was, the formation of inter-parish, deanery, or diocesan discipleship communities. So and what I basically explained there was, within one parish, it's very unlikely that you're going to be able to get a mass of young people who can journey together in faith. But by gathering the 2 or 3 young people, or the 1 to 3 young people in 4 or 5 parishes in a region, you might have a mass of people who can then journey together in faith. Because often it's individual young people who have a bit of faith and they need support and community. So we need to, as one of the core team members in the thing said, we need to forget about our parochial, this is our parish, we need to hold on to our parish, because the reality is we just won't survive. We need to work together. That for me is huge. Okay, sorry. The other one, I'll just see here. What else did I say? The other one I said was, look, for me, there's a massive need for the proper training of catechists, because at the moment in Ireland, and I've witnessed this and I've seen it all over the place, we're entrusting a huge amount of the catechesis of our young people to primary school teachers, and the majority of them are not practicing Catholics. I know many of them myself, both personally and through working in the area over the years. I've met so many of them. They do not express or live or witness an authentic Christian faith. And it is, they might have, let's say, I don't mean to write them off as people. I mean, please hear me kind of in a balanced way on that. But it's simply the reality that we do not have a core group of serious Catholic catechists who are committed to Jesus and his church, forming young people. So, and I know this from my experience on the ground. And again, we can get out there, we can do surveys of, let's say, the state of the faith of our catechists, who most of them are RE teachers or primary school teachers. We need to train catechists and perhaps look at the system for, I would love to see a really, really strong, good, well-formed catechist, maybe even, say, taking responsibility for 4 or 5 primary schools in a region, rather than having 4 or 5 lukewarm, kind of indifferent teachers to the faith, preparing young people for the sacraments. So that's an area to look at. I hope this answer is not too long. The next one is, I said following the example of Holy Family Mission, simply because they are some people who are responding to this need. So is there opportunities to replicate what they're doing elsewhere in the country? Is that a possibility? And then I also said about further study. This case study could be replicated on a broader scale to gain insight from a more diverse range of young Catholics in Ireland. Further study into the preparedness of those entrusted with the catechetical formation of young Catholics in Ireland through our school system would also be invaluable. So I've kind of already said that. So yeah. So there you go.
Okay, thank you, Gerard. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Dermot. Thank you.
Bishop Ray is looking to speak there.
Oh yes, yeah. Bishop Wright, if you just let's see if you can unmute yourself there, Bishop. Oh yes.
No, I agree with what's said. Everything's said, and I've been to Holy Family Mission. I know it's going for 4, 5, 6 years now, whatever it is. And Father Cahill does great work there, at the heart of the community. And I agree what you said there about the, that pilgrimages and those things are what's working insofar as there's work happening. And with a pilgrimage, it's vital that there be preparation beforehand, that people be prepared for it, and it's somehow people also agree to have some contact after for a while. That the pilgrimage itself on its own won't do it. That, as you yourself mentioned, what we'd hope that, it would be great if, this is Diocese of Kerry, but with Zoom, it'd be great if you could have a group of young people, say 18 to 30, beyond secondary school, that would form a group, and 2/3 of their meetings could be on Zoom, a third could be in person, and it could, in that sense, gather from many parishes, because you need that sort of situation. But that reflects how few there are. We need good catechists, but we have to learn the lessons from the past, and we have to also look at what is it about young people that it's not sticking to them, that the faith isn't sticking. The very good teachers, the very committed people who are in schools, having a much bigger success rate than the average ones. We have a fabulous person who retired this year, but she hasn't left a trail of strong Catholics behind her. And her commitment, she actually works with Holy Family Centre and those types of groups. So that, is Ireland different to other places in Europe? And have we enough respect, enough for what it is about secularism that has it in a different world completely from faith? And that somehow the secularism is winning. That, like, in many ways, I often think the program Joe Duffy and Gay Byrne had on, it was amazing that people didn't have confidence in their faith. They couldn't confidently say it. That in a sense, somehow that their confidence is undermined. And there's no question but that science and faith can coexist, just as science and poetry can coexist. That any balanced people can see that, but it's coming across to people that resurrection and all those things are almost in the area of fairy tale. They're not real. The only thing that's real is science. So to appreciate what is it. Is Ireland any different in success rates to Italy, who are very good to try to teach, to England? England and South America have had more. Their Catholic schools have been more Catholic. In America, because they're paying huge sums. And in England, because the Catholics are a minority. But has there been greater success? So that, do we appreciate sufficiently, what it is about the secular situation, that faith isn't catching, that the success rate is very low, and I mean, a religion teacher will tell you in school that you're getting children who've never known what a prayer is, never been inside a church, no idea how to bless themselves. About 10 years ago, there was a lady on Joe Duffy's show, probably was one of the previous, might have been Marion Finucane at the time. She was complaining that the parish was refusing to give her child first communion. And she had no problem with the fact that the child didn't know the Hail Mary. She said, am I telling you, she said, they weren't in Catholic schools in England. How could they know their Hail Mary? That she had no consciousness that You learn to bless yourself. Your first thoughts about God are at home. I just say, how do we respect sufficient? The secular, and how can we handle that? And we say even the graduates of Holy Family School that are good catechists that have worked hard on it for 1 year or two, what success are they having? How are they finding? The communicating, that giving people a sense of God. The kerygma that Pope Francis spoke very eloquently of, and he has put words on it in his very first document, The Joy of the Gospel. So to look at the secular world and respect it and say as an opposition, some would respect it as an evil. But why is it that it's winning hands down every time? Even with the good, the good catechists aren't showing good results, to the best of my knowledge.
Thank you, Bishop Ray. Thank you, Gerard. Do you want to respond to that?
Well, only just to say that it is true, and I suppose it's interesting that we're really up against it. I mean, sometimes even in my own ministry, now I can actually point to certain people who I've been able to walk with and journey with and help in faith and all of that. But for the most part, like sometimes you look back and you're like, how many disciples are following me, or have or am I, like you said, Bishop Ray, like how many of are we leaving this wake of Christian disciples in our past as we move forward? And I think the strength of the secular culture and the crisis of faith is so deep that we need something very, very strong to pull them out. Like for me, it was a very strong encounter with Jesus through confession and the Eucharist that helped to pull me out. If Jesus hadn't revealed himself to me the way he did personally, I wouldn't have had the conviction to actually come after him. And I've interviewed, I would say, hundreds of young people in other work. And it's so common for young people to have had personal encounters with spiritual. I'm not talking about like I had a good experience on a pilgrimage with a group of nice people. I'm talking about personal encounters with Jesus, so often through the sacraments. And I think one of the things that we need to do when you're asking about what works is actually ask young people what has worked for you and then replicate it. Like, for example, in my own ministry experience and in my, and some of the research there as well, I didn't get into it there, but like, how are young people encountering Jesus today? And then replicate that. Like, for example, through confession and the Eucharist, so common all over the world. Young people are encountering Jesus in the Eucharist. That is like, and again, a very, very common faith experience. Other ministries that are growing as well, it's worth looking at that. The likes of Focus missionaries have done remarkable work in terms of actually growing. So what are they doing that's succeeding? Personal friendship is a big one that they emphasize, natural friendship. And then, but also divine intimacy is another core pillar for them. So those Focus missionaries spend an hour in Eucharistic adoration every day. They go to Mass every day. And they lead people to Jesus through the scriptures and the sacraments. But I by the way, I'm not sharing, what I'm sharing now isn't meant to be the answer. It's meant to be the question, or the statement really is, we need to look at what is actually working in the individual lives of young people, and then replicate that, is what I would say.
And I just might add to that about what came across as well in the Krakow Symposium, that young people have valid reasons for distrusting the church due to not receiving answers to their questions. They're really hungry for that their questions be answered in a rational way. They're hungry. There's this kind of craving, but also due to misinformation, negative perceptions about the church in our society. But they express the desire that priests and elders accompany and guide them, but trust them with responsibility and support their own initiatives and agency. They also express the desire for proper formation of catechists, what Gerard said, and also for instruction in how to equip them with their own personal prayer life. That came up again and again, how to pray. So they were just coupled, and also to the pastors, not afraid to proclaim church teaching and to preach the gospel fearlessly. Obviously, in a secular world. So that they were some of the things that I think would fit here as well. But this need for answers in a rational way, and presenting the Catholic teaching, the rationality for us that faith and science are not in contradiction. Yeah.
Can I come in there, Alexander?
Yeah, sure.
And this is coming back. This is funny in its own way, because this is something I inherited from my mother. And when she was young, she was in the YCW in Belfast. And this is even before they got married. She was married. And she used to go in and ask it was a passionist that was running the group there. And she would have questions like that to ask. And he'd say, Betty, I'll have an answer for you that next week. And she could never understand why he couldn't answer her then. Until eventually one day he actually said to her, Betty, will you stop delving with questions like that? It's questions like that have driven theologians mad.
Yeah.
So you're into that. Today's young people aren't any different to the young people of a time past.
No. Thank you.
The whole idea of that, of giving them an experience. And I know I came away very frustrated from an Easter vigil here in my own parish. The Easter vigil didn't even last an hour and a half. And I had been part of a folk group in Dunleary when I was young. And Father Brian McGee, the Vincentian, was very much at the core of that. And we moved into Patstrom-Condra, and the Easter vigil there started 8:30, and it could still be going on at 2:00 in the morning. Okay. And I remember coming in on Easter night and just been so annoyed at what I had experienced and saying, that's why I would like to be ordained, so that I can give the youngsters a flavour of the experience I had.
Thank you, Eilish. Thank you. Any final? Yes, Michael.
I think one of the areas in terms of if we want to reach young people is actually the work with the adults, the work with the older people. I was in Nashville this summer, and the Dominican nuns are one of the big success stories in Nashville. So I went to visit them, and I visited some Protestant pastors in the city as well. And they said to me, they're a kind of a phenomena in Nashville. I said, why is that? They've huge numbers. And so I went to Vespers with them, and there was hundreds of young Dominican nuns all in the church. Now, they were coming back from overseas for their summer get-together. They weren't there all the time. And I was just asking some people in Nashville, why? And it's a puzzle for the people of Nashville, and that thinking, how come the Dominican nuns, Catholic Dominican nuns, their vocation numbers are rising. And so partly they have the lived experience when you're talking to them, chatting to them, there's a huge energy from them and that. And they would say, because they're strong, obviously their mission is mainly in the area of catechesis and evangelization and that. But in my work as a youth worker as well, I would often work on the leaders and less focus on the young people, because there needs to be adults in place of faith who know their faith. So the whole area in some ways is the work with, even though we might rush immediately to young people's needs, and we should, but there's almost a presupposing that there's a whole batch of adults. But in Ireland, the whole middle generation, there's a huge crisis there in faith. So the young people then look towards leadership in the society, and it's struggling. They can see that. So what you're saying, Gerard, yeah, it's bang on. And I just keep looking then to say, so where are the adults who will lead and guide and be an example of? And you will get individual examples in every parish for sure. Yeah. And they may have to be worked with at parish level, I think.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you. Any final comments?
Can I just say, sometimes I think that the crisis can be in knowledge rather than, there's a lack of knowledge. People don't know what they're missing sometimes. They actually don't know what they're missing, and they're rejecting something that they don't know the preciousness and the value of it, So it's knowledge. I think some people, grown adults, are theologically illiterate. And what's happened there? you know.
Yeah. Thank you, Siobhan.
Yeah.
Well, just to thank Gerard again for this evening. Thank you all for joining. Just to mention that the previous webinars, they're up on Catholic Faith Formation Ireland on our YouTube channel. You'll find the 5 previous ones there. And the next webinar in the series is going to be on the 16th of November at the same time. Teaching as God Teaches, Divine Pedagogy in the Directory for Catechesis, presented by a young Dominican sister, Sister Carino Hodder. So hope you can join us for that in November. Thank you very much, and Ihiwa.
Thank you.
Thanks. God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
God bless.